Next up, police in cities across the country, including Boston, use ShotSpotter devices to detect and respond to gunshots before a 911 call is even made. Or at least that's the idea. But the devices get it wrong a lot. According to a new report from the ACLU of Massachusetts, nearly 70% of all ShotSpotter alerts in Boston led to dead ends. And now the ACLU is urging city leaders to end these programs. I'm joined now by Kade Crockford, the director of the ACLU of Massachusetts Technology for Liberty Project, and Tom Chittum, senior vice president of forensic services for the company behind ShotSpotter, SoundThinking. Tom, Kade, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Tom, I want to start with you. For people who aren't familiar with ShotSpotter, what is it and why do you see how does it work and why do you see it as a good technology for places like Boston?
Well, if you didn't know before, you might assume that the system was powered by magic. It's not magic. It's math, it's science, and it's technology. We measure the arrival of sound at different sensors to calculate where the sound of gunfire originated from, so that we can notify police of shootings quickly, so they can respond to them and render aid to gunshot wound victims, so they can locate offenders, so they can collect the valuable ballistic evidence that's left behind at many shootings, and can reassure the community that when gunfire happens in their neighborhood, police will respond to it.
And we have Kade, you looked at, the ACLU did, at over 1,000 BPD documents related to ShotSpotter. What did you find?
That's right. So we asked the Boston Police Department for records documenting incidents in which police responded to ShotSpotter alerts between the period of 2020 and 2022. And we got 1,300 records in response to that request. We carefully analyzed those records, and we found that in almost 70%, in 69% of cases, when police in Boston were deployed to an area in response to a ShotSpotter alert, they found no evidence of gunfire. So that means no witnesses, no victims, no suspects, no shell casings, no bullet holes, nothing of the sort.
We actually have a chart from that report we can show, breaking that down, showing the almost 70% of alerts, as you said, result in no evidence of gunfire. And that also showed that 16% of alerts were from other kinds of sounds, like
That's
fireworks,
right.
Vehicles backfiring. Tom, I want to ask you, is this how you think of the accuracy of the system?
Well, I think that's misleading. So we measure the accuracy of our system across all of our customers. Of course, we take our accuracy seriously because they depend on us. And what we know from measuring our incidents across millions of incidents and more than 170 customers is we get it right about 97% of the time. Just because police don't locate physical evidence of a shooting is not evidence that a shooting did not occur. But I also think it's misleading to focus on percentages. When you look at the nominal numbers, that means hundreds of times ShotSpotter has notified police of shooting incidents. And what we know is there's chronic underreporting of gunfire in many of the communities that are most afflicted by it, which means there are lots of missed opportunities for police to render aid to those gunshot wound victims, to investigate those crimes, and to have a low-friction contact with the citizens that live in those communities, to reassure them that the police do care about them, that they have not been abandoned. If you look at headlines across the country and you remove from them those pieces that are opinion pieces, what you see are the facts. That is that ShotSpotter works. We are locating gunfire. We are leading police to crime scenes. We're leading them to victims. We're not simply getting lucky. The technology really works.
Kade, what do you make of that, the idea that these are, how, without looking at percentages, these are gunshots and gunshot victims, injuries that might not be reported otherwise?
Well, so the records that we reviewed, as you said, indicate that 16% of those cases were actually just other loud noises. So, in fact, one of them was really disturbing, was a piñata at a birthday party. When it finally burst, it made a loud noise, apparently, a noise that was loud enough to fool ShotSpotter's technology and staff of human reviewers. And I would like to get into that for a second as well. into thinking it was a gunshot and not a piñata. But lots of other loud noises can trigger ShotSpotter alerts. You know, cars backfiring, construction noises, someone slamming their garage door. There are a lot of loud noises in an urban environment that can trigger ShotSpotter alerts, particularly fireworks. In fact, my understanding is ShotSpotter has a fireworks suppression mode that the company engages on, you know, holidays like July 4th, because it's actually not possible to distinguish between loud noises like fireworks and gunshots. And for those of you who live in Boston, as I do, in fact, I live in a neighborhood where ShotSpotter is used. The summer is one long fireworks suppression mode. In my neighborhood in Dorchester, there are fireworks pretty much every day of the week, constantly in the summertime in Boston. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why this technology is pretty specious. You know, I think it's important to focus on the 30% figure as much as it is on the 70% figure of cases where the police found no evidence of gunshots. You know, I've seen some comments online of people assuming that in those 30% of cases, police were dispatched to the scene, they found a suspect, they arrested the person, you know, case closed, like a kind of NCIS-style investigation just wrapped up because of this supposedly, you know, advanced technology. But all that we found in those 30% of cases is that police found some evidence of gunfire. That doesn't indicate that ShotSpotter led police to a shooting victim. It doesn't indicate that ShotSpotter led police to a shooting suspect. It merely indicates that maybe, you know, in some of those cases, police arrived at the scene, interviewed people in the neighborhood, and someone said, yeah, I heard a gunshot.
So, Tom, what does happen when ShotSpotter identifies a gunshot? How does it work, I guess, in a way, both in terms of, maybe not too deep into the technology, I understand that, or it's going to be complicated, but how does a gunshot get identified, and what happens when a police department gets this alert?
Yeah. Well, it's not true that we can't distinguish between gunfire and fireworks. In fact, we continue to review alerts on 4th of July, New Year's Eve. We notify our customers of gunfire. Just this last New Year's Eve, we led them to many actual shooting incidents. But what happens is ShotSpotter can't tell you the who of gunfire. We can tell you the what, we can tell you the when, we can tell you the where. Sometimes we can even tell you the how. We have documented a significant increase in the use of illegal machine guns to commit crimes. But then it's up to the police to investigate what happens. And so, like any tool, ShotSpotter is more effective depending on how you use it. We go through several steps to distinguish gunfire from not gunfire. We have been deployed here in the Boston area since 2007. The technology and the processes we use have evolved significantly. So to the extent that some of those mistakes may have occurred in the past, and I don't know that they have, we're not making mistakes like that today. The fact of the matter is we are very often leading police to crime scenes. Just last month in Dorchester, we led police to the shooting scene where they located a gunshot wound victim, and subsequent investigation led to an arrest for it. Last year in Dorchester, near Franklin Field, we located and alerted police to a mass shooting that involved 5 victims, including 2 kids. This is beneficial to the people that live in those communities. It helps them get the police services that they deserve.
So you mentioned Dorchester and Kade. I think the ACLU analysis had some findings that a lot of the ShotSpotter sensors here in Boston are located in Dorchester, in Roxbury, in places where there are a lot of communities of color. Is that
right?
Inaccurate?
Yeah, they're almost exclusively in communities of color, not just here in Boston, but across the country. And of course, the police and likely ShotSpotter will say that's because where gun violence is located, and there's no question that gun violence is located in particular neighborhoods in the city of Boston. There's also no question that gun violence is a very serious issue for particular communities in the city of Boston. And it is our view at the ACLU that that is precisely why it's so important that we have a conversation about technology like ShotSpotter, because this is, this is not a opportunity neutral conversation. You know, if I were diagnosed with a serious illness, I wouldn't want my doctor to prescribe healing crystals. I would want, the real regimen of medicine that's going to make me better. And I think when we think about gun violence, something so serious, we really ought to be looking very carefully and closely at the evidence, not just anecdotal information, but data and evidence about what programs work, what really works to drive down gun violence, what really works to help law enforcement build relationships of trust with communities that are implicated by gun violence to reduce gun violence. And frankly, you know, not just here in Boston, but across the country, the data that we're seeing about the use of ShotSpotter indicates that it is not a tool that reduces gun violence, that it is not a tool that across, you know, a longitudinal study conducted by academic experts, a peer-reviewed study, found reduces gun violence or increases the amount of gun violence arrests or successful prosecutions. At the same time, and that's to say it does not do those things, according to this study, at the same time, you know, if we're having Boston police officers respond in 70% of cases to ShotSpotter alerts finding no evidence of gunfire at all, there's an opportunity cost there for the Boston Police Department, which, you know, numerous city councilors have raised concerns about is a strapped department, you know, needs more resources, needs more boots on the ground. So, you know, if we're sending detectives to spend time that detectives could be using doing something more productive, taping off a street corner in my neighborhood, for example, in response to a ShotSpotter alert, looking for ballistics evidence that may or may not exist, that's an opportunity cost for the city. And so, you know, it's our view at the ACLU that the cost-benefit analysis is pretty clear, that the technology does not benefit public safety and actually raises a lot of very serious civil rights and civil liberties concerns that I hope we can get into. At the same time, we are 1,000% interested in having a robust conversation informed by evidence with folks from the administration, with folks from the Boston City Council, with the Boston Police Department, so that we can get more information about exactly how the BPD uses this technology, how they believe it impacts public safety, bring in, you know, academic experts to evaluate the evidence that we've seen here in Boston and in other communities to make sure, frankly, that we're spending our money, not just the grant money that actually, you know, is sent to ShotSpotter for this program, but also the city taxpayer dollars that are spent paying Boston police officer salaries who are spending a tremendous amount of time responding to ShotSpotter alerts when, in fact, they're not finding any evidence of gunfire.
Tom, I want to let you respond to what Kate has said there, but I also want to ask you, you know, I think a lot of the information that we've seen publicly about where ShotSpotter sensors are located comes from a Wired investigation into some leaked data, which used American Community Survey information and that leaked data. That investigation found that nearly 70% of people who live in a neighborhood with at least one SoundThinking sensor identified in the data as either Black or Latina. Nearly 3/4 of these neighborhoods are majority non-white. The average household earns a little more than $50,000 a year. How does ShotSpotter decide where to, or SoundThinking decide where to place the ShotSpotter sensors?
Well, I think Kade and I probably agree on more than we disagree on. We want safer communities. We want just policing. We want robust protection for our civil liberties. I have long admired the ACLU and its mission. But where we disagree is on the role that ShotSpotter and similar technologies can play in helping bring those things about. So as Kade rightly points out, gun violence is not spread evenly across this country. It disproportionately affects some communities. And so when people say, isn't ShotSpotter disproportionately deployed, I ask, did you also search to see where gun victims disproportionately occur? The fact of the matter is, ShotSpotter is important public safety infrastructure. People in those communities deserve to be safe. They deserve to have effective police response. We know that a lot of gunfire that occurs in those communities is not reported to police for some heartbreaking reasons. People fear retaliation, or they have resigned themselves to living that way, and they don't have to. ShotSpotter helps fill that gap, notifies police so they can respond. I think we definitely agree that police should be responding in a way that's just, that's effective, that respects the rights of law-abiding citizens. At the same time, failing to solve violent crimes in these communities is itself a root cause of crime. We must hold violent criminals accountable and protect the people that live in those communities.
If I could just say, we totally agree that solving violent crimes is very important. The evidence shows that ShotSpotter does not meaningfully advance police investigations in serious shooting incidents. I mean, that's what data shows from longitudinal studies across the country.
So I'm familiar with those studies. Read them carefully. They say that ShotSpotter does what ShotSpotter says it will do. It notifies police of more gunfire, faster, with greater precision, leading to recovery of greater evidence. What the authors of those studies say, though, is that they don't have great insight into the investigative follow-up that occurs. If they did, I think that what they would find is that's where the breakdown occurs. And this is something that we need to promote more of in law enforcement generally. Effective follow-up using crime gun intelligence to solve actual violent crimes.
Okay, I think that's the note we're going to have to end on for today as we continue watching what happens in Boston. Tom Chittum from SoundThinking, Kade Crockford from the ACLU of Massachusetts, thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but do come back next week.